Easter Sunday in 1975 dawned with the promise of celebration for the Ruppert family. However, this ordinary holiday would soon spiral into a nightmare, forever etched in history as the deadliest family massacre in American lore. Stay with us as we delve into the chilling tale of how a seemingly harmless man became a cold-blooded murderer, taking the lives of 11 family members. James Urban Ruppert, born on March 29, 1934, to Charity and Leonard Ruppert, began his life in Hamilton, Ohio, alongside his older brother, Leonard Jr. Yet the Ruppert family was anything but typical. Leonard Sr. was notorious for his violent temper, casting a shadow over the boys' formative years and turning their childhood into a harrowing experience. Compounding their struggles, Charity exhibited a clear preference for her brighter and more self-assured son, Leonard Jr., relegating James to the role of an unwanted second child. Frequently, she would voice her regret, expressing a wish that James had never been born. Such remarks from a mother aimed at her own child left deep scars on James's psyche. Deprived of parental affection, he grew up in isolation, struggling with a shattered self-esteem and a profound sense of worthlessness. His father's neglect extended even to his health. Leonard Sr. insisted on keeping chickens around their home, leading James to develop a debilitating allergy to the feathers. Despite his discomfort, his pleas fell on deaf ears. When James turned 12 in 1947, tragedy struck as his father succumbed to tuberculosis, marking the end of one torment, but the beginning of another. With Leonard Sr. gone, Leonard Jr. quickly assumed the role of the household tyrant. Leonard Jr. took pleasure in belittling James, exacerbating his struggles. At school, James's academic performance plummeted in comparison to his brothers, and with no friends to lean on, he faced the relentless bullying alone. As Charity continued to disregard his existence, the torment from both home and school overwhelmed James. At the tender age of 16, pushed to the brink, he attempted to end his pain. He took sheets from his home in a desperate bid to hang himself, yet fate intervened, and he survived. This moment marked a pivotal shift in James's life. He surrendered to despair, ceasing any attempts to better himself, resigning to the belief that he was destined to be the inferior son. This dark chapter would remain his only attempt at self-harm. By the time he entered college, James stood at a mere 5 feet 6 inches and weighed only 135 pounds. After 2 years of struggling with academia, he abandoned his studies, while Leonard Jr. flourished, graduating with a degree in electrical engineering. The disparity between the brothers widened, particularly when Leonard Jr. married Alma, a former girlfriend of James's, rekindling old wounds. This betrayal would later be identified as a critical motive behind James's descent into madness. Feeling increasingly alienated and victimized, James resigned himself to a life of mediocrity. Although he trained as a draftsman, he seldom found employment, forcing him to continue living under his mother's roof. While James struggled financially, frequently borrowing money from Charity and Leonard Jr., his brother thrived. Leonard Jr. secured a job with General Electric, purchased a home in Fairfield, and built a family with Alma, embracing a life filled with opportunities and 8 children. In a disturbing tableau of familial tension, a group of children gathered in the shadow of despair. 16-year-old Michael, 15-year-old Thomas, 13-year-old Carol, 12-year-old Anne, 11-year-old David, 9-year-old Teresa, and 4-year-old John were all present, perhaps unwittingly drawn together as James Urban Ruppert grappled with his frustrations and failures in life. Ruppert's frustrations found an outlet in an alarming obsession with firearms. His collection boasted a .357 Magnum, 2 .22 handguns, and a .22 rifle. 2 activities became ritualistic for him: drinking copiously and practicing target shooting, each moment steeped in a growing darkness. The corrosive atmosphere within his home pushed Ruppert further into the bottle, a futile attempt to dull the piercing ache of his inadequacies. As the years slipped by and unemployment lingered, Charity Ruppert, his mother, grew increasingly weary of his heavy drinking and lack of ambition. In a desperate bid to spur her son into action, Charity threatened eviction if he failed to contribute financially. However, Ruppert's financial ruin from the stock market crash of 1973 to 1974 rendered him powerless to comply. Her intentions were meant to motivate him, yet unbeknownst to her, this threat pushed him closer to the edge. The weight of impending eviction loomed over Ruppert, gnawing at his psyche. This pressure, coupled with his recent foray into purchasing ammunition, marked a turning point. He was spiraling toward a catastrophic decision. On one fateful day, he inquired about silencers, though he ultimately refrained from that purchase. March 29, 1975, his 41st birthday, found him at the Great Miami River in Hamilton, where he was seen shooting at cans, a seemingly innocuous pastime that would later serve as a crucial detail for the prosecution. His actions that day hinted at a deeper, more sinister preparation, as it became evident that he was on the brink of one of the deadliest nights in Hamilton's history. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ruppert stumbled into a bar known as the 19th Hole Cocktail Lounge. There, he encountered 28-year-old Wanda Bishop, a mother of 5, and shared his plight about his mother's eviction threat, a reflection of his crumbling world. Wanda listened as Ruppert lamented how Charity had reminded him that if he could afford to pay for drinks, he should be able to pay rent. He insisted he needed to find a solution, revealing the depth of his desperation. Ruppert remained in the cocktail lounge until 11 p.m., only to return for more drinks, ultimately staying until the bar closed at 2 o'clock a.m. When Wanda inquired if he had resolved his issues, Ruppert's response was a haunting, "No, not yet." The following morning, Charity, feeling unwell, opted to call Leonard Jr. and his family to join them for Easter dinner, instead of a planned early lunch. As Leonard Jr. and Alma arrived, their children eagerly engaged in an Easter egg hunt outside, while Ruppert remained oblivious, sleeping off a hangover from the previous night's binge. By 4 p.m., Ruppert finally emerged from his slumber, only to find that the celebration had shifted indoors. Charity was busy preparing sloppy joes for the family, with Alma assisting her. After a brief interaction with the family, Ruppert retreated upstairs. In a chilling turn of events, he retrieved his arsenal, a .357 Magnum, 2 .22 handguns, and a rifle. His original intention had been to spend the day at a shooting range, yet a casual remark from his brother altered his course. Leonard Jr.'s question about the Volkswagen struck a nerve within Ruppert, echoing his feelings of inadequacy and failure in life. In that moment, a decision was made that would not only change his life, but also extinguish the lives of 11 others forever. At 6 p.m., as the sun began to set, Charity, Leonard, Alma, their son David, and daughters Tessa and Carol gathered, blissfully unaware of the impending horror that was about to unfold. In a harrowing display of violence, James Urban Ruppert unleashed a barrage of gunfire upon those gathered in the kitchen. His first victims, all shot in the chest, fell one by one. In a desperate attempt to save her family, Charity Ruppert lunged at him, but he shot her in the head, silencing her forever. Ruppert then moved to the living room, where he targeted his niece, Anne Ruppert, and his nephews, Michael and John. After the initial chaos, he methodically circled back, firing multiple rounds into each victim, ensuring none would survive his onslaught. The massacre was ruthless and swift. If any of the victims were still alive, moaning or groaning in pain, Ruppert finished them off with a shot to the head. The entire brutal ordeal unfolded in less than 5 minutes, with Ruppert pausing only once to reload. In total, he fired 44 shots, 40 of which struck their intended targets. Once satisfied that he had extinguished all life in the house, Ruppert sat among the lifeless bodies of his family for 3 agonizing hours. He contemplated ending his own life, but ultimately hesitated, fearing that such an act would seal his fate as a mortal sin. After the long, suffocating silence, he finally reached for the phone and made a 911 call. He informed the dispatcher of a shooting, all while surrounded by the stillness of death. As his relatives took their last breaths, Ruppert remained on the couch, waiting for the police to arrive. "Someone's been shot," he told the dispatcher, his voice calm and collected. When officers arrived moments later, Ruppert met them at the front door, presenting a facade so ordinary that they had no inkling of the horror that awaited them inside. With his unassuming stature and thick black-framed glasses, Ruppert did not fit the typical image of a murderer. However, as the officers stepped inside, they were met with a nightmare that would haunt them forever. One officer later recounted the scene, admitting he had never encountered anything as horrific. He had to step outside to regain his composure, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of blood that had pooled on the wooden floors, seeping through the cracks and dripping into the basement below. There was no sign of struggle, save for an overturned trash can, suggesting that the family had been caught completely off guard, unable to react to the unfolding nightmare. As the Hamilton Police Department processed the shocking revelations, they cordoned off the area with police tape. Neighbors in the small community gathered, puzzled and horrified, as the tragedy unfolded before their eyes, shattering the image of the Ruppert family they had long known. The community's shock deepened when it became clear that the kind and helpful man they had known, James Urban Ruppert, was the perpetrator of this unimaginable crime. The first body to be removed from the house was that of little John, his sneaker visible beneath the sheet that covered him. Dread filled the hearts of those gathered as one by one 11 stretchers emerged from the modest 2-story home, each bearing a lifeless member of the Ruppert family. This tragic scene unfolded in a residence that had once been filled with laughter and love. In total, 11 bodies were discovered, including Ruppert's mother, his brother's wife, and their 8 children. The ages ranged from 17 down to a mere 4 years old, each life extinguished in the blink of an eye. James Urban Ruppert was swiftly arrested, facing 11 counts of aggravated homicide. Though he had been perceived as a quiet, helpful man, Ruppert's demeanor changed drastically upon capture. He remained uncooperative, refusing to divulge any details. Investigators were left grappling with the chilling question: what drove him to commit such an atrocity? In a grim twist, the suspect in custody, James Urban Ruppert, chose silence during his initial questioning. This decision hinted at a chilling strategy, an intention to plead insanity. Prosecutors speculated that Ruppert aimed to exploit the staggering $300,000 inheritance from his mother and brother, left behind in properties and assets. By entering a guilty plea, he could serve time in a court-appointed facility, eventually gaining access to the fortune. The unfolding tragedy led to 2 high-profile trials that captivated public attention. During the first trial, Ruppert made a shocking admission. He confessed to murdering his family but sought to escape full accountability by pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. His defense attorney, Hugh D. Holbrook, became so invested in the case that he personally financed the hiring of a team of psychiatrists to bolster Ruppert's claim. Psychiatrists and psychologists from across the nation were summoned to testify in favor of Ruppert's insanity plea. 2 psychiatrists engaged by his defense team concluded that Ruppert had suffered from severe paranoia and delusions of persecution, claiming these afflictions were rooted in the brutal beatings he endured at the hands of his brother during childhood. They contended that this history of abuse rendered him incapable of controlling his actions at the time of the horrific crime. Among the experts was Dr. Lester Grinspoon, a psychiatrist from Haverford University, who added a chilling perspective. He suggested that had there been more people present in the house that fateful day, Ruppert might have killed them too. This narrative pushed the notion that Ruppert lacked a coherent motive, other than the overwhelming force of insanity after the massacre. In a striking turn of events, following the slaughter, James Ruppert changed his clothes and called the police. He was subsequently charged and tried for the murder of 11 family members. His attorney argued that Ruppert had acted during a psychotic rage, claiming insanity as his defense. As the trial unfolded, a pointed exchange occurred, highlighting the complexities of mental health evaluations. The prosecution questioned whether Ruppert could rationally discuss the case with his attorneys, particularly considering the effects of major tranquilizers he was prescribed. The psychiatrist on the stand acknowledged he had no definitive way to assess Ruppert's mental state, but noted that during their examination, Ruppert had been able to engage in rational conversation. Despite the defense's efforts to frame Ruppert's actions within the context of mental illness, the prosecution contended that his true motive was financial gain. They argued that Ruppert had murdered his family to collect a substantial life insurance policy worth approximately $300,000, suggesting a premeditated plan rather than an impulsive act of insanity. As the case against James Urban Ruppert unfolded, questions arose regarding his mental state. It became clear that his ability to engage rationally with his attorneys was severely compromised, likely due to the influence of a major tranquilizer. By 1975, the United States had abolished the death penalty, sparing Ruppert from a capital sentence. Yet the third judge, Fred Kramer of Hamilton County, diverged from his peers, declaring Ruppert insane. This judgment ignited a legal battle that would unfold over the next few years. Between 1977 and 1978, the Supreme Court of Ohio reviewed the case, ruling that a mistrial had occurred. The judges had been unclear on whether a unanimous decision was required or if a majority would suffice. As a result, Ruppert was granted a second trial, which was set to take place in Findlay, igniting renewed media attention and public intrigue into the complexities of his case. Amidst the chaos, whispers circulated about a staggering motive: his brother's life insurance policy, valued at $300,000. This, many believed, was a pivotal piece of evidence. Instead of allowing his fate to rest in the hands of a jury, Ruppert opted for a trial before 3 judges. However, Ruppert was misinformed, believing that a unanimous decision was required from all 3 judges. In a shocking turn, 2 out of the 3 judges found him sane, leading to his conviction on 11 counts of aggravated murder. He was sentenced to serve 11 consecutive life sentences. In 1975, the United States had imposed a ban on the death penalty, sparing Ruppert from that ultimate punishment. Yet Judge Fred Kramer, the 3rd judge from Hamilton County, deemed Ruppert insane. Between 1977 and 1978, the Supreme Court of Ohio ruled a mistrial had occurred, as the judges were unclear if a unanimous decision or majority rule was necessary. This ruling granted Ruppert a new trial, set to take place in Findlay. In a pivotal turn of events, the Supreme Court of Ohio declared a mistrial. The judges were uncertain whether a unanimous decision was necessary or if a majority rule would suffice. As a result, James Urban Ruppert was granted a new trial, set to take place in Findlay. In Ohio, a critical juncture unfolded in the case of James Urban Ruppert, as it was determined he could not receive a fair trial in the city of Hamilton. On July 23, 1975, the new trial commenced. Ruppert, alongside his defense team, was poised to once again assert an insanity plea. However, the prosecution, skillfully led by John Holcomb, countered with a formidable strategy, calling forth 29 witnesses and presenting 200 exhibits in court. Their approach effectively constructed an alternative narrative that painted a starkly different picture of Ruppert's actions. The prosecution argued that Ruppert's inquiries into silencers, his penchant for shooting practice, and his unsettling discussions about his mother as a problem to be resolved all pointed to a chilling reality. This mass murder was not a product of insanity, but a meticulously planned crime. Compounding this assertion was the timing of the shooting, executed as the church bells began to toll, effectively drowning out the gunfire and stifling any calls for help. The prosecution contended that Ruppert had orchestrated this heinous act with the intent of claiming an insanity plea. Such a plea would have ensured his transfer to Lima State Mental Hospital, where he could later be declared sane. This declaration would pave the way for him to inherit a staggering $300,000 left behind by both Leonard and Charity Ruppert. Ruppert's prospects for inheriting such wealth would vanish if he were convicted of murder. Ultimately, the prosecution's compelling case resonated with the jury, leading to Ruppert being sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences. Years later, in 1982, he was granted another trial on appeal. This time, Ruppert's defense attorney succeeded in persuading the jury to accept the insanity plea. Although Ruppert was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, specifically for the deaths of his brother and mother, he was acquitted of the remaining 9 murder counts. The jury found him not guilty by reason of insanity. The only family member to attend the trial was Alma Ruppert's mother, Edna Allgaier. Edna laid the blame for 13 tragic deaths squarely on Ruppert's shoulders, including that of her husband, who had taken his own life 3 years after the horrific Easter Day incident. Her grief intensified as she also attributed the death of a juror who collapsed during the trial and succumbed to a heart attack to Ruppert's actions. When Edna passed away, her headstone revealed the heart-wrenching truth. She had been preceded in death by 8 grandchildren, all before the age of 48. James Urban Ruppert was incarcerated by the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction at the Franklin Medical Center in Columbus. 13 years later, at the age of 61, he faced a parole hearing, which resulted in denial of release. This pattern continued with 2 additional hearings in 2005 and 2015, both culminating in rejection. During his final hearing in 2015, the Oakwood Correctional Institutional Parole Board issued a statement declaring Ruppert unsuitable for release, citing his negative conduct within the institution and a strong community objection to his freedom. 7 years later, Ruppert passed away at the age of 88 due to natural causes, having spent 47 years behind bars. The man who had brutally murdered 11 family members on that fateful Easter in 1975 had finally met his end at the Franklin Medical Center in Columbus. 7 long years later, James Urban Ruppert passed away at the age of 88, succumbing to natural causes after spending 47 years behind bars. The man infamous for the brutal slaughter of 11 family members on Easter in 1975 had died, leaving a haunting legacy. He breathed his last at Franklin Medical Center in Columbus. According to the Hamilton Journal-News, Ruppert's death was attributed to natural causes. A year after the horrific mass murder, the Ruppert family was laid to rest in Arlington Memorial Garden in Cincinnati, Ohio. In a grim twist of fate, the house where the tragedy unfolded was opened to the public. The belongings of the Ruppert family were auctioned off, and the hardwood floors, stained with the evidence of horror, were masked by carpets in spots where the bloodstains proved too stubborn to erase. The house would eventually be rented to another family, forever shadowed by its dark past. New residents, unaware of the house's haunting history, quickly fled, plagued by strange voices and unexplained noises. To this day, the house remains occupied, carrying the weight of its dark past. The Easter Sunday Massacre is etched in history as one of America's deadliest family massacres. A haunting account titled The Easter Sunday Massacre, A Prosecutor's Diary, was penned by the lead prosecutor himself, revealing the chilling narrative of murderer James Urban Ruppert. Karen Holcomb, the prosecutor's daughter-in-law, brought this tragic tale to life through her book, utilizing notes left behind after his death. Her journey began in the 1990s as a reporter for the Journal-News, unaware that her coverage would lead her to marry the prosecutor's son. Decades later, she would weave her late father-in-law's words into a narrative that deeply explored the trauma left in the wake of this horrific event. What are your thoughts on the case? Do you believe James Urban Ruppert qualified for an insanity plea? Or do you see this as the culmination of a meticulously devised plan, a desperate response to a life filled with abuse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you crave more gripping tales like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, ensuring you don't miss out on more enthralling true crime stories. Until next time.